Hello, I'd like to officially welcome you to today's webinar, Starting Off Strong, Professional Workplace Success. My name is Chris Hawks. I'm a training specialist for AmeriCorps VISTA and a returned Peace Corps volunteer. I served in Belize from 2010 to 2012. I'll be your host for today's webinar, and you will also see our webinar support team, LSI, monitoring the chat and Q&A throughout the presentation. And leading our presentation today is Vivica Brooks. Vivica is an AmeriCorps VISTA alum who completed her service year in Washington, D.C. as a service learning coordinator. She continues to this day serving as a workforce development trainer to underserved and marginalized populations, assisting them on their way to World of Work, or WOW, World of Work. Work. Can't say that word, work. I think I was trying to say World of Warcraft, maybe? I don't know, but World of Work, wow. Finally, we'll also hear from Madeline Carlson, an AmeriCorps VISTA leader serving at Cities of Service in New York City. We're very happy to have the VISTA leader experience that Madeline can share with you all during this presentation and in our Q&A at the end. And I saw a few mentions in the chat about whether this was required. I think there's maybe was some confusion because we did have an orientation webinar yesterday. So that was part of your, for those who are starting on August 31st, that was a required webinar in addition to your next webinar on August 31st. So this is part of our monthly webinar series, and just want to address that it's not necessarily required. If you have other things to do, someone mentioned they were packing or moving, by all means, address your needs. And we will have a recording of this available, posted to the campus afterwards. So this isn't part of the orientation. This is the monthly webinar series. Yeah, just wanted to address that. Saw a few mentions in the chat. So on this slide, we look at our goals. So the first few months in any new position are critical, right? In this era of remote work and social distancing, being able to effectively establish working relationships and communicate effectively online is really essential to workplace success. So our objectives for today's webinar are to really prepare you to, 1, establish shared communication practices with your supervisor, 2, apply best practices for in-person, phone, video, and email communications. And then lastly, identify next steps to build and maintain your professional network. So let's dive on in. I'm very, very happy to welcome Vivica Brooks, who will be leading our presentation today.
Hi, good afternoon, Vistas. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule. I know Vistas, we are multitasking and have numerous things to do, but I am excited and delighted to spend this time with you this afternoon. And so, as Chris said, this afternoon we are going to be discussing a subject that is a win-win for you and your Vista site. Working together to bring about change and presenting your best self online. First thing we're going to look at are some key components for a successful supervisor relationship. The check-in, the expectations, and a really cool technique called managing up. Then we'll switch gears, hop online to discuss our email, social media, and video conference call presence. And interwoven throughout both of these topics, we will be discussing how to build your professional network. So, are we ready? Of course we're ready. We're Vistas. Let's jump in. So when we're thinking about working together to bring about change, most of us has heard that communication is a key in any relationship. And we all know that this is true. But usually people just stop right there after they've heard it. Yep, communication is key, got it. But they don't really drill down into the process of making it happen. So we're going to take a moment and look at that and do just that. And I want you all to just put on your journalism hat for a moment for me, because we're going to use these 4 questions to help us establish communication norms when we're speaking with our supervisor. Now, of course, first things first, whenever you are going to speak with your supervisor, I mean, how many times have someone, grabbed us walking down the hall? I know in the pandemic, and we've been in different places for the last few months, but even if we're just in the middle of something, and this is when everyone has all the questions, right? It's very important, first and foremost, to ask your supervisor or set up a time where they have 10 to 15 minutes just to go through and establish your communication norms. This is going to allow people to be intentional, both yourself and your supervisor, and then really focus on you all coming together and getting clear expectations. So when we think about the how would you like us to communicate? Some people it's email. Are we going to do phone video conferencing? Some people it's texting. So figuring out how is it that you would like to communicate, both your supervisor and yourself, to each other. And then you want to ask that question, when? When are we going to communicate? Some people are good. They want those weekly check-ins, a standing meeting, versus some people are like, you know what? I'll just need a check-in when it's needed. And then making sure we understand the preferred time of day. And then sometimes you might have individuals who just say, I've had a supervisor who was like, just contact me if the house is on fire, Vivica. So it just depends, but it's very important to understand when that happens. It's great for your preparation, but also for your supervisor, and it allows you all to approach receiving feedback and giving feedback at normal times that you've already established. Next, after we've looked at the how, looked at the when, then we want to establish where. Where would you like us to communicate? What is the location and a format? A lot of times, think about when you meet up with your friends. Hey, keep me in the loop. Sometimes plans that are kind of loose like that don't always come to fruition. Meeting with your supervisor is very important to your VISTA year of service. And so when you're doing that, if you can get a calendar invite set up, that really helps to solidify that this is something that's going to take place. So whether that's we'll meet in our office, I'll come to your office, you come to mine, or where have you, make sure you figure out the where, and then right after that, send the calendar invite. And then the last thing is the what. We all have meetings and it's like, what's this about? What are we doing? Right? So this is your meeting. This is your time. First things first. What is it that you want to communicate and discuss? And the best way to guide your conversation is to have an agenda. Nothing fancy, could just be 2 to 3 talking points that you would like to discuss with your supervisor. If it's a hot topic, as I like to call, make sure that we remove that emotion out of it, and we've got some clear examples as to why you're having this discussion with your supervisor. And after you provide the examples, always ask for specific feedback. And that specific feedback will allow you all, the relationship with your supervisor, to have a positive looking forward motion, because we're showing that we're approachable to feedback, we're soliciting it, and then we're able to now go through and implement it. So the next time we meet, or if there's another project that we're working on, your supervisor can see that you were listening and that you were able to go through and make the changes that were necessary. So asking these 4 questions can get you a lot of information. And this next technique is going to help you with that as well. There's a technique that's called managing up. It's a great tool to use when you're working with your supervisor. Now, a lot of times people think that managing up is telling your supervisor how to do their job. And it does get a bad rap. But in actuality, managing up is all about communicating, asking questions, and clarifying expectations to foster a productive working relationship. It's also about creating a shared understanding of projects, timelines, direction, and vision. The VISTA supervisor relationship, like any relationship, it's a partnership. It's making sure that you are clear on your supervisor's expectations and being able to advocate for what it is you need to meet those expectations. So now that we've cleared up the myth around what managing up is not, we're going to look at, and instead, it's a professional development tool to assist us in getting what we need to accomplish our task. Let's take a look at 9 and how you can apply them within your VISTA supervisor relationship. So these 9 steps, and this is, I'll do my warning, right? This is our first professional development tip. If you're able to manage up, this is something that carries you not only successfully through your VISTA year of service, but beyond. And so these are 9 steps that we would want to see anyone who's working inside any organization possess. And as we see there on the left-hand side, becoming a team builder. A team builder. And so what we're going to do, we won't go through all of them, but 3 of them I think are definitely worth pointing out. So that first one, number 1, become a citizen of the organization, contributing beyond your task. You all are not afraid of a challenge, or you wouldn't be a VISTA. So this definitely is something that can come easy to us, but also sometimes we might find ourselves in a situation where, what is it I'm supposed to do now? I've completed these things, so what can I do now? And this is where it's important to understand and know the skill sets that you bring to the table. And when you've had that communication with your supervisor, one of the questions you can always ask is, what are some of the things that you would like to see accomplished during my VISTA year of service? And there you could see those tasks and then how you can expand on those. So definitely becoming a citizen of the organization. The next one, number 3, learning your manager's style and preferences. Another huge one. So when we're thinking about how does this person communicate, where, why do they like to communicate this way? It's very important because this is what's going to allow you. A lot of times we look at our managers and it's just take. But if you can learn your manager's style and the different preferences, this is going to allow you to know, when is it that I need to approach them? Can I handle this on my own? And then it also allows you some flexibility and freedom, tying right back into number 1, how you can contribute beyond your task. And then the last one I want to bring your attention to, number 9, turning no into a problem-solving opportunity. Again, this is where I implore you, VISTAs, digging back into thinking about your why did I join VISTA? It's because you saw a challenge, but you knew that you could be part of the change. And so thinking about how is it that you can turn that no into a problem-solving opportunity. So as you reflect on these and think about it, you can also, as I stated before, tie this into your own professional development. When you get ready to interview or you're exiting your year of service, when you can go in front of your prospective employer and talk about managing up and becoming a team builder by utilizing these techniques, it's a win-win for your organization and also for you. And today, we are fortunate to have on the webinar with us, Madeline. She is a VISTA leader and has had great success with using this tool. And she's going to spend a few moments and share with us some real world valuable techniques that you guys can use as well.
Thank you so much, Vivica. I'm so glad to be here today and to have this opportunity to talk with you all. Again, my name is Madeline Carlson, and my service here as a VISTA leader for Cities of Service and for the Love Your Block program in New York City ends on September 1st. And with that date coming up very soon, my way of grappling with the unknown of the future has included a self-reflection on the practices that I deemed valuable this year. In my experience of service, the relationship that I had with my supervisor was a large determinant of overall professional workplace success. We built a communicative and trusting relationship over the year, and the practices that went into that, I want to bring into my next steps and next job. Since starting to reflect more on that, I organized a few key things for how to build a trusting relationship with a supervisor into the next 3 sections. The first is understanding who you are reporting to and what works for them. I credit this lesson to the previous Director of Operations at Cities of Service, Millie Choi. She shared this advice during a VISTA webinar on time management this year, in which she said, a lot of what is involved in time management has to do with managing up. Because like Viveka mentioned, it's about understanding what's important for you to do. Especially when you're starting out a new role, it's equally important and tricky to assess what your priority items are. And at that point, it's necessary, first and foremost, to understand who you're reporting to, of course, and what their work style is. So that's a throwback to item 3 on the last slide, which was learning your manager's styles and preferences. Part of figuring that out is being observant. The other part is explicitly asking your supervisor the how, when, where, and what questions we covered on the previous slide. In addition to questions like, how do you prefer for me to give you information? Or is this how I should be asking you questions? Checking in like that can build a foundation of communication between you and them. And on the topics of check-ins, or on the topic of check-ins, we can segue nicely to key item number 2, measure twice, cut once. Back to Millie, this is a phrase that she taught me, and I took it to mean, during the beginning stages of any project, check in with your supervisor to ensure that you are on the right track before heading too far in any direction. Give them a week plus. In my experience, scheduling in ample time for my supervisor or another staff member to review my content was a sign of respect. You are respecting their time. Also, asking your supervisor questions like, hey, is this all the information that you think should be captured at the beginning of a project, creates a sense of open communication and a feeling that the two of you are collaborating to create this project. One of the VISTAs I got to work with this year designed a lot of posters for her team's program. She used the concept of measuring twice, cutting once, with her supervisor while designing. Her supervisor would often give her fairly vague instructions on the type of content he wanted. And so this VISTA in response would create a handful of poster templates to share with him during a check-in, because she knew it was easier for him to give concrete instruction when something was in front of him. And in retrospect, I think thinking on that's true for a lot of people. After their check-in, the supervisor would then give the VISTA explicit instructions about the design and the content he preferred, and only then would she go in to intricately assemble and finalize the poster. If she hadn't had that check-in, she may have dedicated a lot of time to creating a poster that, in the end, did not fit her supervisor's vision, and this is how she problem solved. Lastly, key item number 3, the 7 to 1 minute ratio rule. When reaching out to your supervisor, try to keep this ratio in mind. It's not a hard and fast rule, but try spending about 7 minutes preparing for every 1 minute of your supervisor's time that you use. If you're given a task or asked a question and your first impulse is to refer to your supervisor, instead take a pause and consider, do I have the necessary resources to complete that task or to answer that question? Because odds are good that you do. We're resourceful. So research first, ask second. You can also use those 7 minutes to make life a little easier for your supervisor, a little more convenient. This could mean putting together an email draft for them when needed, or sending an agenda well in advance of your check-in with them. And if you use a calendar invite system, including that agenda link in the invite as well. Being resourceful and proactive in combination with regular check-ins with respect to your supervisor's time creates a communicative relationship that can lead to a productive working partnership. For me, after September 1st, these practices, my next the foundation advisor to these to a new audience who are this or 3 months in, wherever you are in your year. I hope these practices are useful. Thank you so much for listening today.
Thank you, Madeline, for not just showing us that it's a theory, but really highlighting your experience and showing that if it's used properly, it can not only benefit you, but the organization you serve by getting what it is you need and expectations quickly. So now we have a quick question for everybody. And I took a quick glance at the chat, and I love Vistas because you guys are already sharing resources and information. I love that collaborative spirit. So now what I'd like you to do, hop on the chat, and don't forget, make sure all panelists and attendees is selected because we all want to see this great information that you're giving out. And asking the question, or answering the question, I apologize. Have you learned about any online communication expectations at your organization?
And just a reminder, when answering, please remember to select or toggle that for all panelists and attendees. That way everyone can kind of see the answers.
You all are fast on the keyboard. It's just a rolling. So we see a lot of yeses. I see some emails coming through, a couple of not really, somewhat, sure. Okay, so it does seem like, okay, what typing school are y'all using? I need it. Okay, so with that, we see a lot of people definitely have had this conversation, might be aware of it. And we know that email is the predominant one that we're using. But to be mindful, every organization and possibly every supervisor may have a different expectation about online communication etiquette. So what expectations does your VISTA site have around online communication? And I know some of you all had said, they're doing emailing, the video conferencing. And so when we think about that and we're thinking about email, the one that everyone is using numerous times a day, there are some foundational things that we want to just go over and to make sure. And some of those are the address and personal names, making sure that we're addressing people. How do we address each other? The subject lines. I always tell people, I won't open an email that has no subject because I want to know what you're sending me. So that subject line, message length, content, and format. Keep it short and easy to read. Are we using the appropriate greeting and reply? Signatures, of course, which will be our professional development point number 2, and always courtesy implied within all of our emails, and then the appropriate use of emoticons and smiley faces. So when we're thinking about how we address someone, we always want to start off with the formal and allow them to tell us how they would like to be addressed going forward. This really shows that courtesy and respect in the beginning, and should they want to be addressed by something other than the formal, the awkwardness is already removed because we started off from a place of courtesy, which leads us to, what is this email about? Subject lines are very important. When we're looking at subject lines, let your recipient know what to expect when opening this email. We're going to be very clear and specific about the topic of the email, and the subject line should be the main point. We want to use logical keywords so the recipient can easily search for your email. I know for myself, I search emails all day long. Vivica, did you get? And I'm like, oh, what was that about? And I'll type it into the search. So using logical keywords that are easily searchable makes it easier for the recipient as well. And when we're doing our greetings, we don't want to have the casual, as we say. We don't want to include greetings such as hello, or just greetings, okay? We want to be able to address the individual. Now let's take a look at a few examples of clear and specific subject lines. So when we're making an introduction, nowadays we're all introducing people virtually. So easily, I would like to introduce you, or an introduction, and list the two parties' names that you would like to introduce. If you are doing your meeting invitation, remember we said one of the things that we want to do going forward with our supervisors, get those calendar invites or meeting invites, clear about who's going to be there, the date and the time. Requests for feedback, and this is one that I have learned, and I've loved to learn it, because from the standpoint of, we've all received emails and someone wants us to look over a document or look over a report, but they'll never ask for the feedback within the subject line. They'll ask for the feedback within the body of the email, and I may have missed it. So, but if someone says to me, Vivica, I need feedback, requested by close of business, that's definitely going to get my attention. And so depending on your audience and how quick you need it too, requesting that feedback and putting exactly what it is you want in the subject line is a great one to use. And then of course, requesting information, just being very clear about what is it that you're looking for. And as VISTAs, as we're capacity building, and reaching out to individuals and partnering with organizations, this is a great thing to put in, inquiring about a partnership or inquiring about design services. So those are things that different subject line examples that you can utilize going forward. The next thing we want to look at is that length and format. I always remind people, it's an email, not a research paper. We want to keep it short. I always like the rule of thumb, no more than 2 paragraphs, if that. More than that, and you might want to pick up the phone and call or go see them if possible. That way, we don't have a lot of things that are just lost in translation. We want to make sure that our fonts should be very easy to read. Remember, most people are using their phones or tablets that have a smaller screen, and sometimes different curly cues, things of that nature, can run together. Times New Roman, always a safe bet. And then we see here, avoiding overuse of emoticons, all right? Also, when we're looking at caps and abbreviations, we want to use those sparingly as well. And then my absolute favorite, newest thing, might not be new to you guys, but definitely for me, Grammarly. All right, using spell check and Grammarly. Nothing like sending out an email with misspellings or not spelling someone's name correctly, things of that nature. So there are a lot of tools that are out there nowadays that can help you to give that professional presentation. And this is not only a reflection on your organization, it's also a reflection on yourself. So as you all are moving forward through your VISTA year of service or continuing your VISTA year of service, always thinking about how am I presenting myself as an AmeriCorps VISTA. So we want to also make sure that we're keeping our emails in the present tense whenever possible. I know that they might be talking about a subject that won't allow for that, but we're always looking for action when we're sending out our emails. So an example, we could just say, I'm doing social media updates on Friday. Please let me know what you would like to post about the volunteers. Just a quick and easy email example of present tense that you would possibly send out. So when we're looking at greetings, and I saw a few of this in the chat as it was going through, and we were doing greetings and closings. So of course, these are not exhaustive lists that go through, but they're definitely ones that allow for a professional introduction to individuals and or organizations. So for all of our formal communication, we definitely want to make sure that we're using the appropriate greeting. So we've got that greeting, the recipient's title, and their last name. One that I wanted to also add, you could even say good day, depending on when you're sending it, is also an appropriate greeting that you can have. Acceptable closings for business email can include best, kind regards, regards, or sincerely. So just when we're starting our emails and closing our emails, that first and last impression are so important. However, there's another aspect of the email that's equally as important, and it's the tone that we use when we're sending our emails. I know everybody has heard, it's not what you say, but how you say it, right? And so here we just see 4 examples of people who sent emails and possibly a better option. And one thing that I have implemented in my own life in sending out emails is my email staying curious? And what I mean by staying curious is it asking a question? And so instead of like that first one we see there, what's the problem? You know, because different people interpret things different ways. I'll take the more curious tone. Is everything okay? Something I can assist you with, okay? Or cancel my appointment. I'm not coming in, okay? Instead of saying, again, with that curious tone, would it be possible? to cancel my appointment. We're getting to the same goal. We're looking for the same answer, but it's all in the tone in which we're asking it. And so those are just a couple of ways to start to think about some better options that we can utilize. And remember the importance of this before we hit send. Because before we hit send, we want to make sure that we've proofread it, we've looked at our email, we've checked our greeting, our subject line, and most importantly, discussing confidential or controversial topics by email. Pay special attention to the types of things we're discussing in the workplace. It's definitely not a place to discuss that personal or confidential information. And as part of workplace email etiquette, it's not appropriate to send libelous, racist, sexist, or scandalous remarks. Just imagine if you were to choose the wrong recipient and send the email to your boss. And I did see where someone had put, I like to schedule send emails just in case. That's an excellent rule of thumb and a perfect transition, because that before you hit send, it gives us that time. You know, did we spell the recipient's name correctly? Names are very personal, and it definitely sets the tone. Misspelling a person's name often looks unprofessional. We also want to look at, did you hit reply all versus reply? We have all gotten that email and made that face. You can't see me, but I'm making the face when I get a reply all. All right. So making sure we look at that and have it reply. Who is our intended audience? Is it really reply all when I just really should have hit reply? And then the last thing we want to look at for this slide is we haven't used text abbreviations. Remember, it isn't a text. It is an email, which is a professional form of communication. And again, all predicated off of who's your audience, but just shortening things and making sure, take the extra time. You all are excellent fast typers, hitting a couple of extra keystrokes. So that example of going to Ghana. And then, like I saw a lot of you all put in here too, I see that some other suggestions that VISTAs are giving each other and all of us is that put it in drafts. Excellent. Put it in drafts, because you want to ask yourself, were you angry, upset when you were drafting this email? It definitely allows you some time and some space in between. So great suggestions you guys are giving out there. One, putting it over, scheduling it to go out at a later time, or also putting it in draft. Very important thing. So before you hit send. So here's an example of an email anyone would be happy to receive. So when we're looking at this email example and we see a very clear subject line, job opening, we know who it's coming from and exactly what it's about. He has an excellent use of length, not too long, and appropriate font, and he does kind of jazz it up a bit to bring our attention, utilizing the purple to say, job description, if you know anyone, please pass it out to your networks. So this is an email example that you can utilize that definitely gets across the message that you want to, and that you can refer back to during your year of service. And then our professional development point number 2 is signature lines. Signature lines are huge. It's a great way to just kind of end. And when I talk about your own professional development, this is a great way to kind of let people know who you are and what you're doing. And so, of course, having the AmeriCorps VISTA logo on your signature line, letting people know and learn more about what you do and the phenomenal things that you're able to pull off as an AmeriCorps VISTA is a great thing. But it's also easy to allow people, you're not searching, oh, I wish I could find, they can just click on your email and find your information. It also adds a polished look to any email. And it can also lead to building your own credentials. Now, this is why we had started off with thinking about that discussion and that with your supervisor, getting those communication norms down, and then moving forward to seeing, Have you had that discussion with your organization about how they would like you to interact across the various platforms? So this could be something, that you can add into that discussion, because maybe it's linking to your LinkedIn, or it's linking to your organization site, or there's a combination of both. So that, again, allows you to work on your own professional development during your year of service. And so we had mentioned always making sure our courtesy is there throughout, and then finding out what that is, whether it's email, present, virtual meetings. But what we're going to look at right now is looking at those different social media platforms. So as we transition to social media, we could spend an entire webinar just on social media alone. But however, today, we are just going to highlight and remind ourselves of a few things. Please do review your organization's social media policy. On the VISTA campus, under the Learning Resources tab, you will find the social media disclaimer. Take a moment, hop over there to the campus, and check it out. It clearly lays out what you can do as an AmeriCorps VISTA. And in conjunction with that, review how your organization utilizes the various platforms, and definitely use social media to spread the word. You guys are doing some phenomenal work, and everyone should know about it. Your organizations are trying to do phenomenal work. So utilize social media to get the word across. Now, I'm going to ask you to please don't engage in rude or divisive or combative posters. Some people, it's just not their day, right? And we're not going to get pulled into any of their other stuff. We definitely don't want to post harmful images or messages, and we don't want to overshare or overuse hashtags, because when we are posting, it is a reflection not only on ourselves, but it's also a reflection on the organizations that we're serving. And we all joined AmeriCorps VISTA to uplift and eradicate poverty. And when we keep in mind of the mission and the why, it gives us some pause, okay? So what you post lives forever. And so before we review our last online presence, our last online presence component, I want you guys to remember, social media can be a huge benefit, absolutely a huge benefit, but it can also be a huge liability. Decide today to use it as a benefit. So as I had just mentioned, we're going to be looking at our last online presence, which is, and I'm sure a lot of you all are familiar with these. We've got Zoom, we've got GoToMeetings, Microsoft Teams, WebEx, Google Meet. Who knows what they'll come out with next, right? There are numerous video conferencing services, and 2020 has proved to be the year of the monitor. But guess what? It's made us all stars. And we know that when you are a star, you have to be ready. So let's talk about what you need and how to get ready to host a meeting and participate successfully in a meeting. So if you are hosting a video call before the meeting, make sure you test your tech. Provide participants with an agenda and any presentations they may need prior to. Upload any presentation materials. And we want to keep the colors and fonts simple. Again, we're remembering that people might be looking at the video conference call from various modalities. So it could be their cell phone, could be a tablet, could be a laptop or a desktop. So when we keep the colors and fonts simple, we also want to make sure that we reduce the background noise. We're going to turn the cell phones to vibrate and close windows and doors if possible. And then select that you can mute all participants upon entry. This way, as people are coming in to join the meeting, whatever is going on while they're getting situated, we won't all hear it. And then we want to adjust your lighting. Cameras need light, so let's use it. If it's possible, take a picture prior to, just so you can see how you're looking. Remember, this may be the first time the recipient has seen you. What do you want to show them? We're also going to make sure when we're hosting a video call that we're using introductions. Who's here? Maintain that eye contact and keep the body movements to a minimum. Let participants know that they can use the chat or instant messaging to ask questions, and build in 5 to 7 minutes to wrap up your meeting and cover any outstanding concerns and questions. And most importantly, make sure you thank everyone for attending and their engagement during your meeting. So now that we've looked at how to host a meeting when we're the participant on a video call. So when we're the participant, we do see that test the tech again, very important. But then we can also put that piece on where we can add your photo. It is, nowadays, our camera phones are like mini digital cameras. So take a photo of yourself. Make sure, and you could also use this photo, you can take it yourself, or you can have a friend or a colleague take it for you. And this could be your stand-in. We all know it's a little easier when we can get a visual of an individual. And don't forget, you could also use this headshot for your LinkedIn, professional development, all right? When you're a participant, we want to make sure we stay engaged. We're definitely on time for our meeting, and then find out the norms. Are we doing cameras on or off? And then mute yourself if you're not speaking. And remember to pause. We've all seen the newscasters, they're kind of talking over each other because there could be a delay there. So sometimes we just need to pause as we're getting used to our new normal. And always display professional attire and an environment around you. The virtual environment, especially in this day and age, is just like the office or the center that you may have been working in. If you would not wear it to your site, don't wear it on camera. So believe it or not, we've been talking about you this entire time. Everything that we've discussed is going to and will impact your professional network. Use this time to really build out your career network. And just some of the things to remind us of who is our career network. Don't forget school, your friends and family, the public advocates and associations that you're reaching out to or that you're going to be partnering with, of course, your work contacts, AmeriCorps VISTA alums. Head over to the campus and see who's who. There's also a LinkedIn page for AmeriCorps VISTA alums as well. And then we have community collaborators who can assist us as well. Keep track of your projects. As I've stated, you guys are doing a lot. And so you don't want to end up 9-10 months into service, thinking about what's my next move and what did I do? Start to keep track of your progress, of your projects that you're doing, and also keep track of the people that you're meeting. Network, all right? And so when you're networking, setting up at least one informational interview. An informational interview, just briefly, I'll just let you guys know what it is if you're not familiar, is just when you're thinking about what is my next move or what is it that I want to do, and you want to speak to someone who's already in that role or that position, and just asking them, do you have 15-20 minutes to sit with me? I'm interested in your organization. I'm interested in how you came to work at this organization, or I'm just interested in the work that you do. It's not asking for a job, but it's a way in which you can start to, in a relaxed environment, start to build out your professional network or even increase your professional network. And brag about your work. Brag about your work. You guys are creating, you're collaborating, you're partnering. There's various things that you're doing. So start to keep track of those things in a digital portfolio if you have access to that. So we're going to use the VISTA campus, and I have a challenge for you VISTAs, which I know you can do. When your next steps, these 5 things: establish a regular check-in with your supervisor. Go in and create a professional signature line. I think people are already working on that from what I see in the chat. Perfect the professional conference call background, that headshot, okay? Set up one informational interview before your year of service ends and start your digital portfolio. I wish each of you a great year of service, and thank you so much for serving.
Thank you, Vivica. Thank you so much. And we're actually going to have a few moments for Q&A. We saw a few of the questions coming in. But for right now, we'd also ask that you just please take a couple moments to give us feedback on the webinar. Again, we're constantly reviewing the content and trying to make it better for our future webinars. So please, please, please just take a couple of minutes to fill out the quick survey. As you're filling those out, we can start looking at a few of the questions that came in to see here. One thing I noted, just to start off, a few mentions in the chat and it's like one or two in the Q&A about the VISTA logo. So you can you're certainly permitted to use the VISTA logo in your signature line. Now, your project maybe has a certain standard where they prefer a certain manner for a signature line. That's something you would want to check with your supervisor on. But in terms of just, general permission, or rights, absolutely, you could use that. There's a link on nationalservice.gov. I'll post it in the chat again in a second, where you can access those logos too. But one of those questions, Vivica, maybe that came in regarding signature lines, it was I haven't been successful with lining up my signature line. Do you have a recommended signature line software or service that can kind of align everything automatically, or is it just a matter of doing it manually?
Okay, full disclosure, I had help with mine.
Mm-hmm.
But I believe, because we started it in Word, so we just put everything in Word and then cut and paste it over.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's kind of how I did mine too. Just kind of playing with it a little and doing that. Yeah, so I think it just might take some tinkering. There might be a software out there, but I don't think it's necessary as long as you just take a little time and patience in getting that correct.
Yeah.
Okay, and a couple of questions came in kind of regarding the managing up slides, and so I'll shoot this to you, Vivica, and Madeline. Feel free to step in if you have any thoughts. But one of them was, can you elaborate on or maybe provide an additional example of turning no into a problem-solving opportunity? I think that was one of the steps in the managing up one. So yeah, I didn't know if you, Vivica, if you had like an example. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So turning that no into an opportunity. So for myself, during my VISTA year of service, as you saw, I was a service learning coordinator, and I came in like, woo-hoo-hoo, guns a-blazing, like, we're gonna change the world. And so a lot of times, just working in any government capacity, it's a lot of red tape and bureaucracy. So I was getting, no, we can't do this with the students. No, we can't do this. And so what I started to do was to think about the tasks that they had given me, meet with my direct supervisors, and to really figure out what were those boundaries. And so, of course, whenever you're working, in certain situations, there's different guidelines that you can work with. But when you're hit with that no, first thing, communicate. And then kind of like when we asked about the tone, the way in which that can be phrased so that it's coming from I hear you saying no. I still think this is something that could be applicable or definitely advantageous for the population that we're serving. And these are my reasons as to why. And kind of give people a snapshot as to how your vision and how it can happen. I realize a lot of times when people say no, it's because they don't understand how it's going to come out. But if you can provide them with a vision and they can kind of see it, they're like, okay. okay, you can try it. So I know that's the best way. That's one thing that I use now when I'm trying to turn a no into an opportunity. And Madeline, I'm sure you've have many examples of that as well.
Yeah, and I interpreted it, I think that's really helpful, and interpreting it also into asking your supervisor or another staff member, does this resource exist? Is there a volunteer database as an example, or is there, for me, there was a situation where we didn't have a database full of project descriptions, and turning that no into an opportunity to create that. And so then plugging in with what Viveka was saying, and sort of back to the measuring twice, cutting once lesson, that you can create this new content, and then before you've gone all the way in one direction, checking in and bringing it to your supervisor and asking, is this something that's useful to you? Is there any way I can change it to make it better? Slightly different, yeah, but yes.
Thank you both. Thanks. And another one, I like this question. I think it's important, especially now. So when working remotely, what is your recommendation for making sure your supervisor is not necessarily overwhelmed by you? Or for instance, since you're not in the office, the only way to communicate is messaging or email, and it might seem overwhelming if you have a question now and send an email, then another question pops up and you send another email. Do you have any recommendations for, kind of easing that in, or making sure that type of communication is okay with your supervisor?
Absolutely. This is a thing we call front loading. And so with front loading, you're able to, whether you've been at your VISTA site for a while and you're taking on a new project, a new task, or you've just joined and you've had this discussion. And I always say, I am very excited to be here. I know it's, been a couple of months, I'm learning the ropes, but would you mind if I ask you questions regarding this? I think if you go through and put that information in ahead of time, you've already laid the foundation. So it's more about, okay, I was expecting this. It goes back to that visioning. I want you to envision that I'm going to have a lot of questions. How would you like us to approach this? And so I think that, when you're coming through and saying, that you have questions, I always go back and reframe it from the standpoint of, I really want to do a great job. I really want to make sure that I'm using our time here and our resources, and you can put it in that way. And then it takes the pressure off of both of you. You're not sitting and just thinking, ooh, I want to call or email or text. You've already let them know that this is what you're going to be doing. You're going to need a few additional supports as you're getting this project underway. How would you like to move forward with that? And keep asking.
Yes.
Yeah. Madeline, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just a quick plug because it's fresh in mind right now. I love this question, and although I've almost completed this year of service, so there's less questions than I had in the first 3 to 6 months. There's an example of this week. I've been going over our team's metrics trackers, and there were a lot of questions that I needed my supervisors add in to make a decision, and I saved all those questions in a document listed out for our weekly check-in. And so rather, I could feel myself like being tempted to just like pepper her with questions, but instead I waited for our weekly check-in, and then I had that opportunity to lay it out, and I'd sent that agenda beforehand with the questions in, so she had a chance to look over them and prepare for them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I did the same as well when starting off in CNCS, was keeping a running list. Obviously, there's going to be, a question here or there that requires immediate attention, but your supervisor is going to be aware that, that's the reason why you're sending this one-off question, because you need to take care of something immediately. But yeah, the other questions, I love that advice, holding those for a weekly check-in. We might have time for one other quick question. We're getting towards the top of the hour. How about this? This I don't know if this will be a quick question, but we'll see what responses you'll have. So everyone at my site sends a ton of emails. Do you have any tips on how to tell when an email requires a response versus when it does not? Is this opening up a can of worms?
Yeah, because then it can get into also, I think that's that piece too, where it's important to understand the norms of your organization. And then you're able then to kind of, I don't want to say just brush off. That's, I don't want to say that, but from the standpoint of, like once you get with an organization, you understand the norms and how people communicate, it gives you a better handle on how to respond to individuals. And so when we were talking about subject lines, and that's that piece about subject lines, that I think is very important, because when we put in that, like when someone says, I need, or feedback, it'll say feedback requested. So I think that's something that just kind of catches your eye, and that's something that you've got to give attention to. I think that what you can do is I think that communication is key, and it's more vital now since we do not have some of the nonverbal cues to work off of with individuals and our new normal. And so going back to that communication and just getting clarification from people as to what would you like me to do next? So I think that's one thing, because again, also part of that kind of reply all reply. Was this for me, or was this sent out to the whole team kind of thing? So I do think that that's important too. It could be a can of worms there and to see. But I also think that's why emails should be in present tense. They should have some kind of action to them.
Yeah, thanks, Vivica, and thanks, Madeline, for those responses. We are at the top of the hour. I think we just have a quick closing comment, but we certainly appreciate everyone attending this webinar, and we certainly hope you can join us for our next webinar, Resiliency and Service Wellness, which will be September 24th at the same time, 3 p.m. Eastern. This will be posted on the webinars page of the campus. In addition to a recording of this webinar, we'll have the recording on the campus in early next week, likely. So we hope to see you next month, and thank you so much for your service and all that you do. We appreciate it so much.